Good morning, YouTubers. It's getting to be late in May. It's the 29th now, 2019, and hey, I finally got to see this film. This is a film you'd think maybe, given all my focus on the Bucky stuff, that I had seen already. But just yesterday, The House of Tomorrow, right? So this is it was on the new release shelf at Movie Madness. We still have an old-fashioned rental DVD rental store. Most of that's gone now because the streaming services came along like Netflix and Amazon, Hulu, and goodbye Hollywood, Blockbuster, um, all these rental stores that sprung up everywhere across the country have a hard time doing business now. But we have one nearby, and thank God. I also saw another one, by the way, at the same time. It was a double feature. I talk about these in my blogs. I review them separately. They're not quite on the same wavelength exactly, but they're both anthropological and deal with gender. The House of Tomorrow is very, as I say in my blog, heteronormal. It's a young boy meeting girls the same age, and wow, he's like tempted out of his shelter. He's kind of living in an egg. He's kind of there with his nana, and it's not a bad life. They've got a beautiful dome. The thing about this, the other one I saw, Lindsay picked it out, Leela. Anyway, the deal with the dome is, if you read Bucky Works, so some of the reviewers of this film, a lot of them are like, yeah, Bucky's quaint now, dated, even our futurism is old. In a way, everything's dated, yes, but there are timeless things in philosophy too. I think that people don't quite get the idea on the domes, and that's why I want to mention this book, which I've lost the dust cover, so it's just black, which is very boring. Just to have a black book to show you. But I got it signed by J. Baldwin, and he also mentions me in the preface, among many people that he's grateful to. I'm in a sentence there with Bob Gray, and what this book makes clear, the J. Baldwin book, is that the dome was more likely to be a big external structure, big enough to contain more like a conventional house that had the 90-degree angles, but wouldn't need redundant roofing and all that stuff again, because we've already got the dome taking care of the sheltering aspect. So the dome is the weatherproofing, and it's got to be therefore translucent. We're not looking to box you in so much as create a lighthouse, a house that's light, literally lightweight and permeable to all the light. So you see what's going on, and that's why we were using pillows. In other words, argon-filled, transparent pillows for windows, not necessarily glass. But there's a lot of research we haven't done. The thing is to cut down on wood use. So this graph here, this is an essay I wrote in the 90s after Bucky Works came out, meditating thereon and sharing my vision of how the personal workspace, which is also the home entertainment center, this whole idea of a media room, big time popular in American suburbia, where you have these ranch-style houses with room to spare. And let's have a media room. The kids all have bedrooms. There's this sense of privacy you get in an American house for every family member that, it's a lifestyle that a lot of people don't get or they would aspire to but don't have, and so forth. So Fuller isn't trying to take that away, and from the House of Tomorrow, I didn't get that the Nana and the kid didn't have their private spaces. They did have their private spaces, but it was a wooden dome, and the shell itself it wasn't exactly what Fuller thought of. In fact, here in Martian Math, one of my favorite pictures, let's see if I can get there quickly while I'm talking about it. Let's see, Martian Math, Reed College. college. Can I find it that easily? Maybe. Okay, table of contents. So let's just page through this math stuff here. So there we go. That's kind of a parody. This picture. It's not the one I'm heading to, but it's a good one to go to on the way. This is from the cover of a science fiction magazine, and this is supposedly on Mars. And that's a classic cottage with a white picket fence kind of place inside a dome. But that's a good meme. That reminds you of where Fuller was going with this quite a bit. Now, why don't aerospace companies, why isn't Lockheed and Boeing and all these companies, why don't they have branches or subdivisions that are wholly invested in research and development around giving us something other than mobile homes, i.e., those things they have in Florida by the conzillion that keep getting hit by hurricanes and stuff. We have this idea that everyone, if you do have a house, it should be unique somehow, I guess. I don't know. We know they're not. I mean, one suburban house looks like another. There's the McMansion style. If you want the big columns and the portico, whatever. There are so many styles, okay? So, yes, there's Adobe. We can have individualized different looks, and we'd have that in the Fullerverse, too, and the Buckyverse. In his parallel universe, it's not that there wouldn't be differences, but there would be large runs of certain models, like we do with cell phones and cars. There would be the Model 12, the 1250, and everyone gets the 1250, or a lot of people get the 1250. I'm making up model names like computers, and this is the picture I wanted to come to. And Fuller's holding like his Model 1250 internals, which is a kitchen and everything. Let's say that all fits in a shipping container. It looks kind of rectangular. Like it can fold out. It's very densified so that it will all ship in one shipping container. A truck brings it. The dome's already built, or you build the dome after, I don't know. And there you've got your external shelter, your internal living units, and your garden all inside. And then you can have more garden outside. It's not either or, but at least you've got that inside protection. And then when you're ready to upgrade, you're really just renting this thing. You're paying a fee. This is how Bucky saw it. Don't anchor people by making them quote unquote own big heavy things they can never move. Because at the time Bell Telephone had kind of a monopoly, and Fuller admired as a service industry how you could just sort of rent your phone, but when a new model came out that was cooler, you could just sort of return your phone and rent the next generation. You weren't stuck with a lot of inconvenient financial transactions. You didn't have to go to see a realtor just because you wanted to upgrade your phone. So I think whatever language we use, whatever vocabulary we use, Fuller's goal was to give us all an upgrade path, or even not upgrade, just you could change your circumstances fairly easily. Now, my friend Dave Koski, he got to go to a debut of this film in Minnesota, and on Facebook I'm talking with him and also Patricia Ravasio about the movie. She wrote this Girl from Spaceship Earth, which is about her interview with Bucky early in her career and late in his, partial overlap of scenarios there. And then she had a long sort of saga trying to get to where she could write a whole book on this interview, which she finally did. And this tells her story. It's an autobiography, and it's a good window into, it's kind of like we all grow up in a certain period in history. So when writing your autobiography, you have an opportunity to bring in the surroundings and give people a picture of your time in the universe, and she does a good job of that. So let's keep this channel open in terms of research and development. It was not a crazy idea that you take your best technology, i.e. your maritime seagoing technology. Fuller had been in the military, had been in the Navy. He gets off the Navy and goes into Chicago, and it's like, okay, now we got to earn money. His Navy, that wasn't the issue. And people have a whole different attitude towards life in the Navy because they're not waiting for, it's not about the paycheck. And that's true. I would say we live in military socialism in a lot of ways in the United States, so-called. I say so-called because I grant that nations are still in the consciousness of all of us, even if they're not really in control. The sovereignty thing, I don't know. I feel like there's a, get into that. Anyway, we've got this period in history where we possibly could take care of people's needs at a much better level and make this less of a ghetto planet, because I can't imagine that you think you have high living standards if everyone around you is dying of starvation or miserable, physically miserable. Psychologically, we don't know what it would be like to have a planet where fewer people down to zero are just dying from neglect, malign neglect. We're really taking care of people. That's a mission. It's something that you can fulfill. You can go out in the world and see that you're making a positive difference. Now, I think that would be less of a ghetto planet and less of a spiritual desert as well as a side benefit, because you see clearly what you're up to. You're improving life standards, you're improving the circumstances of people, and that's your job. You're not building weapons of mass destruction or even using them. That drives living standards down. I think if you're on a planet where the major leading species is at war with itself and causing vast carnage and committing atrocities in great numbers, like one bomb is just a giant atrocity. If you're doing that, you've clearly gotten born on kind of a Planet of the Apes place. And that's where we're at. That's kind of a Gnostic thing where we're kind of prisoners of a really dysfunctional planet, and we'd really like to make it better. And I think the movie expresses the cynicism that youth might have, that that could never be. We can't improve this really because A, we're all going to die, and B, life is miserable and suffering. And that's kind of a Buddhist attitude, in that suffering is the ground. And I'm not disputing that. I'm not saying that the fuller world is minus suffering, because I think utopia gets stigmatized sometimes as this la-la land where no one has spiritual issues. Because why? But you're still going to die. There's still suffering and jealousy and interpersonal strife. Don't change humans or human nature, change their environment. That was Fuller's sort of motto. And by that he meant, creating artifacts, researching new ways to do housing, all that changes the environment. It changes our sense of possibility. But as for human nature, this is a billions-year-old, billions, millions, whatever. We're an old organism, not by geological standards really, but if you count our evolution, we are. And we don't know enough to want to, quote, change human nature. That's, all those MK Ultra and stuff. Let's get the drugs going that we can root out the badness in people or stop violence or something. Again, Fuller wasn't going after human nature. He wasn't coming to you wagging his finger and going, you're bad, you need to get better before we can make the world better. He wasn't doing that. And I think we get that we don't get that because we think of philosophers as giving us moral codes. I think he's more Nietzsche-like in that he's not a good and evil guy so much. Whether he thinks humans are good or bad, he's not really caring about that. It's like when you watch a nature film, do you really need to put moral judgments on all the little animals? Like, oh, that's a bad chipmunk, and that's a good wolf or something. I mean, leave the moral judgments aside and get on with the engineering in some degree. That could be seen as an ethical point of view already. I mean, that in itself is a moral step. So lots to talk about. I just want to point out, like, what other contemporary philosopher can you think of where a grandmother might try to bring their kid up kind of just completely embracing their worldview? Bucky is one of a kind in recent times, I'd say, in that he has kind of a panoptic, omni sort of sort of all-encompassing vision of what we could do as a species be a success. Not many of those people in contemporary times, let alone taking out patents and putting their ideas into practice. From my point of view, that was pretty strong performance. And if you want to carry on as a strong philosopher of uh, some kind of invention like that, some kind of inventiveness, merging the philosopher with the creative inventor, the Leonardo da Vinci stereotype, I think that's what Bucky wanted to do as well. And I would encourage that. Let's merge philosophy and engineering. If the architects want to stick around, let's let them. All right, talk to you later.